I don't want to do them all in order because I think it goes from like highest profile and most interesting to kind of like lower on the list. So I'll ask you about these bottom 6 names. Okay. You pick one. I guess it's 7, but you pick 1 or 2 and tell me who you really want to talk about here when it comes to being an RFA target for the Canucks. I'll give you the names. Okay. Jack McBain, Ryan McLeod, Rasmus Kupari, Morgan Barron, Noah Cates, Maxime, what the hell's that name? Siplikov. I don't know who that is. And Nick Robertson. Give me a name here. And don't pick that Siplikov kid because I've never heard of him.
Well, okay, so I can't say any of the top guys first. The names that I'm like actually excited about.
We'll talk about the other guys first. I'm trying to get through the bottom ones first, man.
Okay, fair enough. You're trying to like build the hype.
That's right.
I understand. Okay, so let's go through like reverse like process of elimination. I would probably axe Nick Robertson. He's 5'9", and while he is intriguing from the perspective of like he's been a 14-15 goal guy despite not playing more than 12 minutes per game, he's 5'9", and he's a relatively one-dimensional player. You already got Hoagland and Garland as smaller wingers. Let's axe him. Kupari and Barron are interesting, but they're more like depth names. I don't look at either one of them as necessarily being more than like low end third liners. So, and we want to swing big. So I'll like process of elimination, sort of like X those guys.
Tell me Noah Cates is someone you really like.
I do. I like Noah Cates.
I'm a big Noah Cates guy. I'm getting onto the Noah Cates bandwagon here.
He's like a younger, bigger Pia Suter. That's the potential. So I don't know why NHL.com officially lists him as winger because he's mostly played center for the Flyers. But the point being, he's versatile in being able to play center and wing. He was Philadelphia's go-to shutdown option to defend against other teams' top lines this season. It was also interesting because at the start of the season, he was, I think, healthy scratch for 4 of Philadelphia's first 5 games. So it was like a bit of a rocky start, but then he really figured things out over the course of the season. Cates' defensive results have long been stellar, not just this season, but in years past too, despite the difficulty of his matchups. Quality PK guy. And with the exception of the 2023-24 season, he's been like a reliable bet to chip in with about like 15 goals and like the high 30-point range, almost 40 points in a given season. He's not a perfect fit. He struggles in the faceoff dot, and I think he's definitely a lot closer to a 3C than he is a 2C. But if the Canucks are looking for a versatile, sort of like defensively minded forward to replace Suter, like that would be really attractive. Again, he's 26 years old. He's 6'1" or 6'2". So you'd have control of him for a while. Again, you're not looking at him as like a top 6 solution by any means, but further down the lineup, being able to plug holes all over the lineup and play tough matchups, which when you look at Pettersson and Chytil as the centers you have right now, I don't know that Adam Foote would be comfortable playing either of those guys head-to-head in hard defensive minutes. I think this team could really benefit from like a Swiss Army knife type forward if Suter ends up pricing himself out.
Now, with Noah Cates, again, I look at it in the sense of, okay, you just made a really good point that the number 1 and 2 center on this team, Pettersson, Chytil, not super ideal right now. I look at Noah Cates and say, okay, you need Noah Cates, and then you need to go get a second line center. Am I off on that?
Yeah, no, agree. You're ideally not going into next season with Pettersson and then Chytil Cates. I mean,
even if it's not Cates, like we've had this conversation all season. Whoever you get at center, you want to be able to slot them ahead of Filip Chytil and pretty comfortably as well.
Yeah, now maybe the only way you'd be comfortable with Pettersson, Cates, Chytil is if the majority of your cap space is spent on, let's say, like a star winger. You're able to get an Ehlers or a JJ Peterka or Lafreniere, and you think he's going to pop. And your marquee, like big splashy, this guy's going to be the forward with elite potential to take us to the next level is the winger. Because then I think you could say, all right, if the second best forward you're acquiring this summer is Noah Cates, I mean, that's not optimal because this team needs more than just one high-end top 6 forward. But we also have to be realistic, right? The Canucks have around $14-ish million in cap space that don't have a lot of trade assets. I don't think it's realistic to go out this summer and acquire 2 stars. And as a stopgap, Cates is a totally capable middle 6 center, again, sort of in that Pius Suter mold.
What's that next contract look like? That's going to be the question that everybody asks when we talk about these guys.
Yeah, I think the sweet spot, especially as we talk about potential offer sheets, is we've mentioned the importance of holding on to that 2026 first round pick. I think when it comes to offer sheets with that in mind, you have to be wary of the compensation levels. And so the highest salary / cap hit you can go up to, where you're only giving up a second round pick, is about $4.68 million. Now, if you're the Canucks, you're trying to game out the sweet spot where what's a number that's high enough to where Philly might not want to match, but obviously doesn't exceed that $4.68 million threshold. And the tricky part with Philadelphia is they actually have a lot of cap space. And so if they're high on Cates, even if you go up to $4.68 million, they may match that. That's a threat. They're not strapped for cap space. It really just comes down to how highly do they sort of covet him. And given that that's a team that doesn't have a lot of proven centers as well, I think the trickiest part about acquiring Cates is finding an offer sheet that the Flyers wouldn't match.
Probably gonna have to trade for him. I think that's the ultimate thing that I keep coming back to when we talk about offer sheet candidates and these RFAs. It's like you're probably gonna have to just make a trade for these guys, in my opinion, at least. I think you're gonna, like, if Noah Cates comes to Vancouver, it's not gonna be via offer sheet. It's gonna be via trade. AFP Analytics has him at $4.614 million as his projected cap hit on his next deal, on a 3-year deal. That is what AFP Analytics is projecting.
Siplikov, by the way, is an interesting
name,
sort of like potential breakout. Well, so he's 26 years old. He was signed out of the KHL as this like big time 31 goal scorer. This year, you look at his numbers and they don't jump off the page, right? He only had 10 goals and 35 points in 77 games. But Siplikov is a massive dude. 6'3", 210, but he plays bigger than that too. He could be a wrecking ball in the forecheck. I don't know if fans remember, but he, in, I want to say, a November game, it was at Rogers Arena, he laid out Quinn Hughes with an open ice hit. And just that physicality has been a consistent part of his game. And as a player that's only had 1 year of experience at the NHL level, and playing for an Isles team that doesn't create a lot of offense, it's not like he had the most talented line mates to play with. Does he have some upside beyond his current production level? And not to mention management change, right? Matthew Darche is in there now. Siplikov was brought in by the last regime. Does this regime view him as highly as the last regime? Siplikov could be sort of an interesting, like, middle 6, like, power forward type. And we know that the Canucks need to get bigger and meaner and nastier up front.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like Siplikov. I do. After not knowing who he is, I like this profile. Again, you just said it. Big body, scores, scored 31 goals in the KHL, as you said. I like Siplikov. Didn't know who he was 10 minutes ago, but I might be a Siplikov guy right now.
Can we stop talking about the bottom guys?
Yep.
They're not bad, but like,
I really just want to talk about Cates. Okay.
All right, fair enough.
And that's JJ Peterka, right?
100%. It's JJ Peterka. He's a young, dynamic, speedy winger with star potential. He's 23 years old, and his point production has increased every year since entering the NHL. He had 32 points as a rookie, 28 goals and 50 points as a sophomore, 68 points this season. So already has a really high sort of threshold as an established top 6 scorer. Prolific 5-on-5 producer. He's scored 2.25 points per 60 at 5-on-5 over the last 2 seasons, which ranks top 20 among all NHL wingers. Fast, dynamic on entries. He's got a lethal shot off the rush. Can beat goalies from distance clean. And if he plays with a playmaker as well, he's talented at getting open in the slot and just these like quick one-timers where he's not overpowering goaltenders necessarily with the power of his shot, but just the quickness of his release. Now, you may be wondering, all right, you got a 23-year-old stud, near 70-point guy. what's the potential complication? How could the Canucks even realistically pry him away? And this is where the Sabres have a trio of our big RFA decisions to make, on Peterka, on Byram, on Ryan McLeod, who had a breakout season and is a valuable centerman as well. Plus, Alex Tuch is a year away from unrestricted free agency, and I anticipate that they're going to be trying to lock him up this summer. So the point being, like, they've got a lot of other big contracts on the horizon here. And the key is, despite Peterka breaking out with 68 points offensively, he had a really rough year defensively. His defensive analytics were the worst among Sabres forwards. And the theme for the Sabres this year was, okay, this team can score, but they don't defend. And we know that the Sabres are potentially looking at shaking up their core. So do they look at Peterka and the inflated potential price of his next contract, which I think he's potentially an $8 million guy on a long-term deal. You look at Matt Coronado. We've brought this example up many times. He's coming off a 24-goal, 47-point season, and he's a $6.5 million player. So Peterka, coming off a 68-point season, is going to make significantly more. So the question for Buffalo is, are you ready to fully buy in and commit to Peterka as an $8 million player when you've got a lot of other sort of major contracts on the horizon here, and when he's had a down year defensively? To me, I would bet on the talent of the player. And if you're the Canucks, you look at his defensive numbers this year and go, yeah, he's got flaws, but he's 23 years old. Like, young players can figure out and round out other parts of their game. And most importantly, his defensive numbers weren't bad at all in 2023-24. So this could just be a 1 year kind of outlier, especially on a Sabres team that just as a whole doesn't defend very well. And sometimes a player's defensive play can improve when they're in a tighter, more insulated, like more structured defensive environment, which Vancouver would obviously be compared to Buffalo. So I would be all over Peterka. He has the potential to be a consistent 70 to 80 point guy.
And then some, I'd say. 23, and he's already putting up those kind of numbers. Might be able to do more than that, especially in Vancouver.
Yeah, and I'd be trying to work out a trade here. You don't need to work out an offer sheet necessarily. That's plan B, obviously. But you can also go into trade negotiations with the leverage that, hey, if we can't work out a trade here, we can offer sheet your guy too. And this is where it's going to be interesting, right? Because what do the Sabres, if they're open to the idea of moving Peterka, what would they want for him? We know that they are desperate for right side, top four defense help. That's where I look at like a Tom Willander and go, Tom Willander in his prime would be the perfect piece for that Sabres blue line, because Dahleen and Power on the left side are more offensively oriented guys, and they need more of like a steady defensive stopper who will be reliable in his own end, big body, defensively responsible, on and on. The complication is Willander isn't going to be that top four answer right away. He's young. He may need some time to marinate in the American League. So how appealing is Willander? That's one of the pieces that I would expect if the Sabres are entertaining the idea of trading Peterka to the Canucks. He'd be one of the pieces that I would expect Buffalo to target, or at least be intrigued by.
Okay, other names on your list: Matthew Knies, Marco Rossi, Gabe Vilardi, Bowen Byram. Let's focus on those ones. Give me one you want to talk about here. I like Matthew Knies a lot. I feel like ultimately it's not that realistic, though. I'm worried about how they would get Matthew Knies to Vancouver. That seems like a player Toronto won't part with.
Yeah, Knies would be the home run answer there. But as you said, I think he's the least likely of those names to not make it through. I'll give you a name that didn't end up on the list that we sort of overlooked. And in hindsight, I should have caught this one too. Will Cuylle out in New York. I think there are a lot of factors that could make this potentially work. Cuylle is a big, powerful 6'3" winger. He's an excellent forechecker, heavy body, genuinely physical, right? Some guys have the size, but they don't actually play a mean game. Will Cuylle plays a mean game. He racks up a ton of hits. Broke out with 20 goals and 45 points as a sophomore this year. I believe he's 23 years old. So you're looking at him as a player that could still have further upside. And for a young player to take a step on that Rangers team where almost everybody disappointed, that's meaningful. Now with Cuylle, it's also fascinating because the Rangers, according to Puckpedia, have less than $10 million in cap space. K'Andre Miller is also an important RFA that they have to make a decision on. I would imagine that Miller, since he's coming off a bridge deal, wants a lucrative long-term extension, even though he's coming off a bit of a down year. So if you're prioritizing re-signing K'Andre Miller, could you make the Rangers uncomfortable with an offer sheet that, again, is in that sort of maybe $4.6 million range, where the compensation would only be a second-round pick, but that cap number could potentially be higher than the Rangers would want to go with Cuylle? Because I imagine they're thinking if we can bridge him on a cheap sort of like 2-year deal in the 2-3 million range, that would probably be optimal for them. By getting to the $4.6 million range, it could get interesting with their cap situation, because as much as they would want to keep him, they'd have to, I would imagine, move other pieces around potentially to match that kind of offer sheet.
One name that really I don't want to say surprised me to see on your list, but one that I think maybe was one that I scratched my head at a little bit. Bowen Byram. I feel like the ship sailed on Bowen Byram. Wasn't the time to trade for Bowen Byram before they got Marcus Pettersson? This team doesn't need more defensemen. Explain Bowen Byram being on this list to me.
I actually agree with you. That was one of those where I actually pushed back on that when we were like making the list. Because again, like Drance does an amazing job of like drafting up the first list and doing the grunt work in the beginning, and then I'll sort of give my feedback. Like I wanted to include Peterka, and I pushed back on Byram. But he made the point that the Canucks defense, like long term, still isn't really set. And his point was, look, the Canucks have shown interest in him in the past, and the Canucks probably shouldn't be going after him this summer. But he's a high profile guy. It's a long list. We can include him. And then he literally told me, you can include in his section. It doesn't make sense for the Canucks specifically to go after him. And that's what we did in that section. The conclusion was basically, he'd be intriguing for other teams, but the Canucks specifically probably shouldn't go for him.